at the time, singularity type issues, although not by that name. There's one line where one human is talking to the other, and it says, "Remember spaceships."
Yes.
I wanted to invert. This was probably on the book. It's probably sold. In fact, I know it was sold. I wrote it and I couldn't sell it. And I sent it around and around and around and around and around. And two people who rejected it wrote me not just nice letters, but letters that clarified why no one liked the story. One was Harlan Ellison, so I submitted it for Dangerous Visions, and the other was Ben Bowe, who also rejected it. But in his case, I could see what I did, and I submitted it. And the basic point was I wanted to convert John Campbell's, what is it about humans in a John Campbell story that makes them special? We all know, if you read very much astounding from that era, that there was this fact that we scared the rest of the universe because we lived so fast and we were pretty vicious and we were going to take over the universe. Well, I just said, let's invert that and make something that has all those characteristics compared to humans. And so the life cycle was, as Mark says, is 2 years, and the reason why it's pretty definitely 2 years is that the reproductive cycle is that there may be some genetic conjugation that goes on between individuals, but basically the life cycle is you get pregnant after 2 years, and you may have hundreds of children and they eat their way out. So the cemeteries and the maternity hospitals are the same place. And these critters essentially go through, before humans arrive, go through cycles where they just eat everything on the planet, and then they almost all die. And then the plants have a chance to come back, and then they eat everything on the planet, and they almost all die. And this was actually pretty explicit in the story, and it's one of the reasons why I might have made it into Dangerous Visions, and that is that Christianity saved their souls. Because these Christian evangelists showed up and says, "That's just wrong." And these creatures were actually very smart. And the ones that converted to Christianity tried to be good in a sense of not eating everything and not killing everybody around them. And so after about 50 years, they had 19th century technology on their own. And this story takes place about 30 years after that, where they're just about ready to get into spaceflight. And so they have a very high, they really, the ones that have adopted this sort of policy of restraint find it very difficult. They're just barely able to do it. But it looks like another 30 years and the humans are going to be in serious problems. So that was several major themes, and then also I've always been into Zelazny, and I try to imitate different writers. That's when I write these short stories, and I don't think anybody ever notices because my imitations are so bad, and I certainly can't write. My prose is just not in a league with Roger Zelazny's. But one thing that is one conceptual thing that I got out of Zelazny's stories, I think, was the notion that if you're going to write a story, forget about singularity issues, if you're going to write a story 200 years from now, it's sort of foolish to imagine that there would be anything in the story that would look different depending on whether the story was written in 1940 or in 1960. From the height of 2010, that's very clear, since there's probably some people in this room who don't see very much difference between 1960 and 1940. Well, I'll tell you, in 1960, it looked very different to me than what I knew about 1940. So, in this story, I was very careful. I tried very hard not to have anything in the story that involved explicit technology references that were beyond what you would get in a 1940s science fiction piece of science fiction. The humans were obviously far beyond 1940, but the thing is they never talked about atomic energy. there was that line about remember Starship.
Well, the restraint with which you touched on the high tech there, there's clearly some sort of high tech. Remember starships, I don't know how they travel, but you didn't tell anybody. And whatever the transcendental technology is, if I remember right, the only time you see it is someone is fiddling with a piece of cloth or folding it.
Yes.
And that somehow does things.
Yes, in fact, that really grosses their alien, they're having some action going on in the story, and they're hiding out in church, and oh, there's been a breakout from a local orphanage. They're all orphanages. There's been a breakout from a local orphanage, and the children have escaped, and they're coming their way. And also the Earth police are attempting to intimidate the planetary government into turning these humans over. And so they're sitting around, and the chief human renegade scientist is playing with this little doodad, and the local asks, what the hell is that? And he says, it's not hard to explain. The best thing I can do is it should give us a run of good luck. and the alien is just pissed, Don't patronize me.
So why don't we go to the place where everything changes? We have to get there. So let's talk a little bit about the singularity. I know there's at least one person in the room that doesn't know what that is. Could you start by giving us a brief? And if you can't hear me, you can just watch my list.
What I mean by singularity or technological singularity is conjecture that, or the feeling that in the relatively near future that humans using technology will either create and or become something that's superhumanly intelligent. And if that would happen, it would be a different form of technological progress than in the past, which technological progress in the past you could easily explain to people from the earlier past. And they might not believe you, but they would understand what you were saying. You couldn't explain, on the other hand, our era to a goldfish. Similarly, you can't explain what's going to happen after the singularity to us at our point in time. So that's my take on the term. And it's I like to say that the singularity has cast a long shadow back, at least into the 20th century. That in science fiction, except for the notion that it might happen quite soon, that's widespread all through 20th century science fiction. Starting from the 1950s on, late 1950s, when you began to get this down at the conference, these guys talking about, AI, 1975 for sure. That meant that percolated, the notion of it coming soon percolated out. And you can see it in World War I. There's actually a very explicit thing toward the end where this general was talking about this is a different form of arms race we're in now. And he was very unhappy about it. My first use of the term was actually at an AI conference in 1982. And it was Jim Hogan, Robert Sheckley, me, and Marvin Minsky on this panel. And I was just thinking about, this business about talking about human equivalent intelligences and stuff, it's really not the point. The point is what happens 6 months after that. And the analogy with singularity is very natural, both in the sense of it's a big rule change, and also the analogy with relativistic singularities in black holes. And there's so little information you can get out beyond the nebula.
So you can, with we're running others are starting to move towards it. How did it gel? Because you've got 5 different ways of augmenting intelligence. There is a lot that went into this.
Right. I would say that most of my stories from the beginning had this, and that was probably, and that was the sea that I was a little fish swimming in. The Dartmouth people, I still have on my bookshelf the Autonomous Studies, strange name, given what we know that term means, this ordinary computer science. Autonomous Studies from 1959. So this was all there. However, after that panel at Carnegie Mellon in '82, an editor from Omni magazine was in the audience and came up and said, "Oh, that's cool idea. Would you write an op-ed piece for Omni about that?" So that gave me an opportunity to sit down and do that. And so that was that magazine article came out in '83, and I wrote a couple novels in the '80s, and they were both conditioned on this Peace War and real time. They both used the idea. Meantime, I was actually going to science fiction conventions, and I would chat this up. So I was writing it, especially in the real time. I was writing about it, and then I had the opportunity, and as you all know, going to science fiction conventions is an excellent way of getting into talking to people in a very low pressure environment. I really have had a softball life in that ordinary teaching. It's not nearly softball for so nice a reason. But if you're the instructor, it's people are pretty nice to you. And then in conventions where you can bring these things up, and in the case of the conventions, very often a big chunk of the audience were people who were into computers. I can remember one year I was at Minicon, and all sorts of computer people there, and I would trot out these ideas, and there would be feedback about them. And so this notion of, I don't know exactly where the notion of delineating 4 or 5 categories came, but it's pretty obvious it would come out of something like that. And then in '92, we should have Jeff Landis here, because I think it was his fine hand that got me invited to a sort of futurology conference that was being held by NASA at NASA Lewis, and they actually wanted the speech, but they also wanted the paper. Oh, that was kind of the right time. I've been thinking about it formally for 10 years or so to just bring all that together. And I really that paper is on my website at San Diego State, and it is really, I go back and look at that sometimes and say, really there's not that much more I can think of saying here. I did a very, very good job. I'm very happy with that paper. I don't think there's any one of those points where you say, "Oh my God, what was I thinking when I said that?" And then Stuart Brand, just about the same time I had been invited to NASA Lewis, he wanted me to write an essay about the singularity for the whole Earth review magazine. And I said, this should be very easy. I told him this should be very easy, since I'm having to do that for NASA. And I think that there's no contract conflict there. And so what they published is, I think it's slightly shortened. So that actually put me in a position there where nowadays when people talk about the history of my use of that term, they generally point to the 1992 because it's most clearly articulated and easily accessible.
That's a pretty word. Right, that's when the whole idea was finished.
Right.
10 years ago. So this is one that resonates not only with science fiction readers, but with technologists and scientists as well. I'm not aware of any other idea that people our culture, science fiction culture, that got an issue of the IEEE Spectrum magazine dedicated to it.
Yeah.
I wish I'd thought to bring it with me home someplace. But you've had a lot of things that resonated well, more than almost anyone else I can think of in film. You want to talk a little bit about True Names? That one a bit more.
Oh, yeah, I have this idea box, which originally was a physical box. And every time I get an idea, I would put it in the box, now it's a file. And when it's time to write a story, I could play solitaire with the cards. And you know that one theory of creativity, a reductionist theory of creativity is you just need two engines. One can generate ideas, mostly focus, ideas very, very fast, and another thing one can generate ideas very, very fast, and the other can inspect ideas and discard bogus ideas very, very fast. And you just turn on these as co-processes and just walk away, let it run for a while. And what's left is some really creative stuff. And I apply that with these little idea piles because I will put together ideas that don't seem to make any sense that being put together. And after I make 4 or 5 piles, I will look at them again and say, is there a story that combines A's and B's? And then if you write such a story, say, my God, where did you ever think of putting those together? In the case of true names, there was one particular idea that had been sitting around in my idea file for ages, and that was from reading the Earthsea trilogy. In fact, that's where I got the idea, although Rumpelstiltskin had the idea. That's the idea too. And that is the idea of that knowing the name of somebody or something giving you a special power over that. And I realized that when I was reading the Earthsea trilogy, this went into my idea box because I said, this Earthsea trilogy I think is a frank fantasy, frankly fantasy. And on the other hand, the idea of the true name giving you power, I could see how that could be perfectly ordinary hard science fiction idea. For instance, if there was a database that assigned a serial number to every object in the physical world, that serial number would be its true name, its key into the database, and then you would know all sorts of things about the object. So actually, that's not the whole idea of the storage. And that waited for a much longer time, and that was in the late 1970s. We had two dial-in telephone lines to the PDP-11 computer at school, and you could check out a portable terminal like a teletype and take it home, and they also give you a modem, and you could call into school, and maybe no one else had checked out more than one other one, and you could get into school. And so I'm on the computer, and at that time I was probably teaching PDP-11 assembly language or something like that, and I'm doing my stuff, and all of a sudden, some other guy, probably not a faculty member, probably a student sitting in a computer lab, and we had more than 2 computers, we had more than 2 terminals in the computer lab, so it could have been one of 2 dozen sites or terminals. And he started using the talk program, and sort of like, it's not like instant messaging. And all of a sudden on your terminal, hi, you want to talk? No. But I had forgotten to turn off that option. I didn't know about the option. And so we chatted for several minutes. And actually, it was kind of fun. And finally I said, well, I have to go now because really I'm a personality simulator. And if we talk for much more, this will become so glaringly obvious that you would guess it would be really interesting. So not. And so we both went our separate ways. And afterwards, I was saying, by the standards of my childhood, forget the last crack that I made in the conversation, by the standards of my childhood, what had just happened was a science fiction story. And then tying that together with the name's idea card, it was just, I think probably of all the stories I've ever written, some of which took years for me, when I was in high school to kind of put together, True Names was just a completely obvious thing to write because scaling it up to the internet, since I didn't have to design the internet protocol, or make the hardware work, or make the communications network work, scaling it up to a worldwide computer network was an intellectually trivial exercise based on what I already had in that idea box. So it was a real easy, a very fun story to write. There is one weakness with it, and that was it came out about 2 years too early. There is such a thing as saying the cool thing too early. The great science fiction cartoonist, Bill Rosslin. Oh, he had so many beautiful cartoons. And one of the most profound was he had this character who had invented a quality meter. And it was sort of like the classic cartoon thing where you hit it, and the thing rises up, and they call it. But it was a scale. So you take your manuscript and you put it on a scale. And so the scale was graduated. And in the cartoon, which was really just a picture of the device and a guy about to put his manuscript on it, the lowest level was utter shit. And there were various other not so blasphemous or not so taboo terms for really, really bad, okay, so very average. So it's kind of interesting. Oh, good. Oh, this story changed my life. That was another thing. And then above that was dangerous. and then above that, way up at the top, was utter shit. So, from a marketing standpoint, don't write stuff that is not recognizable.
My first memory of True Names was it was the story everybody was talking about. Was this a republication then? Because I thought it was an immediate hit.
Oh, it was an immediate hit for people like you. For instance, that's the reason I got invited to the AI conference at MIT, at Carnegie Mellon. My guess is that Marvin Minsky talked to the people. Omni paid for that trip, by the way. But my guess is that Marvin, I was sitting on the sofa one day, and all of a sudden I got this call. Hello, this is Marvin Minsky. Now, I knew who Marvin Minsky was. I don't think I was completely incredulous. Nah, you're putting me on. But this is Marvin Minsky, and I was wondering if you'd like to come to Carnegie Mellon for this conference. And so, in fact, he was, this story, I don't mean this story was denigrated. It was up for a nebula. It was one of the few times it's been up for a nebula. And Marvin, I wasn't there, but apparently Marvin was at the awards ceremony. And he asked, what often happens at the SFWA, they have a non-science fiction person gives a keynote speech. And he gave this great speech about True Names. And I heard about this, obviously from people who were there. So yeah, there really was large fractions, and the fact that, and clearly the fact that it made the nebula final ballot. So I don't mean to say that it was ignored, but the resonant peak for the marketplace was probably about 18 months later.
And about 10 years after that, as I recall, there was a book published that had True Names in it, and a collection of essays by different scientists on how this affected them, how it was real, and how it was true. It included one by, I think it was their introduction or an afterword, or something by Marvin Minsky. People like Patty Mays, welcome names. So that one didn't peak and go away. That's still around there, still getting popular.
Yeah, it does. The sense that it peaks is that it becomes a great cliche. I only had one story ever optioned for movies, but it's been optioned about 6 times. That's the story. And as the years have passed, it's sort of interesting as you can see the movie value of the story erode. And I'm not talking bitter. I was robbed by somebody who stole the story. The thing is, these are ideas that are commonplace in this technological era. Movies have been made that use those ideas. And, this is just the way world technology is now. That those ideas are what are important ideas in this. And so, bit by bit, significant chunks of the story have gone away. And the last time I had the movie option, actually a person I know pretty well by this time, I was like, pointing out to him, the window of opportunity is closing here. He says, yeah, well, I don't remember what he said, but essentially I'm able to take one more crack at sneaking through the closing window.
Is it still active? It's still the option?
No. And an opportunity.
Make a James calendar. He's done things happen.
Just, your point about movies reminded me, one of your stories I thought was exceptionally prescient was, again, it's one I don't recall the name, but the chief scientist of the computer company was tasked to investigate the theft of computer power. And it was an analog story in the 70s.
Yeah, actually, it's my only story yet.
Oh, okay. But anyway, he's digging and digging and digging and discovers finally that one of the top researchers is using all their computer power to do computer animation and is animating Lord of the Rings. It's so good. Yeah, basically says, okay, I guess I'm in the movie business. Yeah. As far as I know, this is the first serious look at computer animation. First time I can recall ever having read about the idea of it.
That story is actually a textbook example of all sorts of good things about science fiction and all sorts of bad things about science fiction. But by the way, I recommend that Tor has this collection of my stories titled The Collected Stories of Earth and I wrote stuff beginning and after those, and I think it's really a fun collection. That particular story it illustrates one of the great weaknesses of general weaknesses of science fiction, almost impossible to avoid, and that is that if you write a story about something that has a very high impact because of technology, if you're one of the early writers about such a story, your story will probably be seriously unrealistic, because in the real world, by the time the event happens, it will have been chatted up, beginning perhaps with your story, but it will have been chatted up for decades. So look at computer animation. Computer animation does not sneak in because somebody stole some computer time, which is sort of an anachronism to begin with. It was something that actually I came across the idea from a 1962 trip to Disneyland, just looking at the stuff, and all this stuff with drawing this computer stuff, that looks very manual and labor intensive. I ought to be able to do that with a computer. And that's why I went into my story, my idea about this. But in fact, there were people doing digital animation before the story was that were beginning to really do it. Bell Labs had a wireframe cube that would rotate before your very eyes. Probably, I don't know how much sooner computer time that was. I wouldn't be surprised.
about one digital.
Enormously less than that, because it was just basically a cube with the lines connecting the vertices. I don't know what the refresh rate was, but so that was there, and then and at the same time, another thing about the story that you can see is the story came out about the time of Moore's Law and Moore's essay, which is kind of recalled as well. And I can remember every week I would go up and read the late. It was a magazine called Electronics, and I would go up to the library and I would read that because it was really it just had all these ideas. And so I may have seen that essay, but in any case, the story takes place. This tape was written in '66 or '67, and it takes place in '93. And I had the Moore's Law stuff just dead on. I think that was some later time after '93. I looked at what was described. And as far as we can tell about the machine, it was about what you could get in the institutional setting in '93. And that's also about what you could do if you really wanted to dedicate it to doing some moderately interesting animation. okay, that's actually, I'm very proud of that. But then there's other stuff about it that is just so dead wrong. For years, I didn't republish this story. And then I saw this review that Daryl Schweitzer wrote, in which he went through and he cherry-picked all the things that I did right. I kind of looked like, I just utterly crushed it. That is so cool. So, okay, I said I'll swallow my embarrassment and I'll republish this story. And I'm not going to tell you all the things that I got, all the embarrassing, terrible things that I got wrong. But I can summarize it in one thing. The reason they were able to catch the guy who was doing this, who actually, he had bent his whole career from the early 1950s, in which he had been a Greenwich Village artist, with no technical background at all. And he had ultimately become a first-rate, one of the fundamentally important technical people in this big country company. He had done it all those years, because he wanted to make the Lord of the Rings. and he could do it as a one-man operation, because there were all these computers going on. And anyway, the way they caught him was that only the high executives, of which he was one, in the computer company had access to their own terminals.
So in the earlier stories we were talking about, you were not very specific about the technology, so they became part of fun. In recent books, certainly, you've been very explicit about the technology, scarily explicit and scarily impressive. Things like fast times at Ridgemont High and the augmented reality and all that. So you're more comfortable with that. Tell us about that. Tell us why.
Oh, actually, Fast Times at Paramount High and yeah, I think that's going to get, yes, and of course that was what I was up to, so, and Rainbow's End, especially Rainbow's End, was very hard to write. That sort of Mechanics Illustrated science fiction is really painful, and some of the reviewers were clearly pained.
And do you need to get protection, body protection, if you're at a library?
Oh, yeah, the librarians had a very interesting reaction to my plan to digitize their libraries with tree shredders. And it's not entirely been what you might think, because one of the fundamental tensions or pressures that modern librarians have to live under is they don't have any floor space. So there may be this little voice in the back of their head, this might not be such a bad idea after all. But I really kind of pulled out the stops on those two stories in terms of being explicit, because there was some technology that looked like it could really be done. It has really obvious effects. And so I threw a lot of the safety net, removed a lot of the safety net and just kind of pulled ahead with it. And it took so long to write that there were some things that I was doing, not only are they true now, they were true before I turned in the manuscript. It's really bad to be scooped on a science fiction story, but it's already old by the time you turn it in. However, there's also the thing that, and this is through fandom indirectly, I know people who are making those devices. I know people who have thought through an enormous number of consequences. And so it was really just a matter of, and they were eager to tell me all these things that could be done. And so I had, well, you guys invited me out to IBM, so there's an example of being able to talk to people who were interested in this stuff. So I really had lots of very concrete examples that I could work with.
I think one of the concepts that you used that really has resonated with me since the time I read it was the ease of forming ad hoc relationships to get work done across great geographical distances. The almost instantaneous way to put together someone in Instagram and somebody
Right.
and get work done, and it's done. It's peaceful. It's over. It's on to the next thing. Because we're seeing so much starting to happen. It's course, great distances, so it's not, it's the, getting that technological enablement right, along with the social piece that happens. It's scary, I don't like some of the things that happen. So
Oh,
I hope the rest doesn't come true.
Yeah, Rainbow's End actually is not intended to be a utopia. I think it may have been up for a Prometheus Award, and I made the point to my friends, lots of friends in that community, and I know the people who, run the awards. I said, look at this and understand, I'm not claiming this is a libertarian story. In fact, it looks to me like it's the most mellow sort of tyranny you could imagine coming out of successful DRM and a complete panopticon state. And frankly, I don't think that's going to work. And I hope the DRM doesn't. I hope that falls by the wayside quickly. But that is really what the story is saying is happening. And I don't want to claim otherwise.
I was just going to say, all this talk, because there's three geeks up here, has all been about science. I'm not a scientist. I love your books because of the deep humanity. I think you're a great humanist writer. I think you're a great adventure writer. I love deepness and fire, probably the best of what I've read. You write about betrayal and friendship and parental love and vision and striving. So those two books, do I understand them like a sequel to the Van Nguyen arc?
Without Van Nguyen. Yeah, I'm working on a conventional sort of a sequel to Fire Company. So it takes place in the Times world. It takes place about 2 years later.
If the end of Colonel really needed that, we should work on it.
I'm really suffering on that angle.
When might we expect to see it?
I've finally gotten to it's been very hard to write. It's gotten to be very long, and I'm finally getting mentally invested in it, in the sense that this could be good. But I haven't had enough time to work on it. So there is
No. Tell us.
Really?
No, well, I'm sure that at least one other person doesn't know this. Go ahead.
Oh, allegedly one of the how would I know? I'm not an engineer. But allegedly one of the characteristics of an engineer is you can't get the product away from them.
Oh, that's true, that's true.
This isn't really as good as it could be, And so, should the engineer time speaks for itself, if you're aware of that problem.
I know the concept,
Right. And so anyway, I'm at the stage right now, emotionally invested in making the story better. And I thought I'd be able to just give it up earlier, but it got better too slowly, and there's so much that's wrong with it. And I think it'll really disappoint some people. For instance, I don't think any of my characters fly around in space. It was all times ago. If I could finish it by the middle of this year, if I could do that, then probably Tor could bring it out in the middle of next year.
You mentioned the Prometheus Award. There were a pair of stories that I always thought was probably the most perceptive and humane analysis of libertarianism from an opposite points of view. The Ungoverned, and a story, I think it's called The Umpire.
Pyrrhic
Pyrrhic, okay, I remember a different title, but you know the story. It takes place in Australia.
Yes, right.
And the interesting thing is there are two different looks, one utopian and one dystopian looks at libertarianism. I found it completely fascinating. You care to talk about that at all?
Yeah. Pyrrhic defeat was written really before it became a libertarian, and well, my idea at the time that my ideas about governance were very incoherent, so there is a sort of, any anarchy or things that other people call anarchy needs some rationale why it doesn't just communists. Anarcho-capitalist, that tells you the secret of why the anarchism works is that they're all capitalists. And in pure, anyway, in this story, which is in the Colombian, they had a solution that was basically based on something I totally disbelieve in now, called the antitrust law. That you did anything you wanted, but there were these sort of priests who came out and said, "You're too big," and if they said you were too big, there was some special word they had for it, antitrust rule or something like that. A mob would rise. People were convinced of this stuff. They didn't have any laws, but if one of the priest class determined that you were too big, you got small real fast, generally with a great deal of and this was an invading race, somewhat more technically advanced than us. And we had just had a nuclear war. We were not in a position to mess with these guys. And they were just going to take over. And their notion, this came from my idea box because Chad Oliver, I think it sensitized me to this notion of what it might mean to have an alien culture. And we're so tolerant, so tolerant of various things. But I wanted to make a race that thought it was enlightened, and that in some sense it was, but it was still totally repugnant to what most of our cultures would have. And these people were like that. They really pissed us off, because essentially anything goes, as long as you didn't become a big enough organization to make everybody else fall into step. And they were wealthy enough that they were just going to sweep us aside because we had managed to blow ourselves back into like the 1900s. So that was that story. And then many years later, in the Ungoverned, I was very inspired by a book I recommend to everybody called Machinery of Freedom by David Friedman, in which he essentially lays out, forget about libertarianism, he lays out a blueprint in complete detail for a working society that has a very different sort of basis than what we are used to, that truly doesn't have a government, but from minute to minute you can't tell that. It's very much like a modern Christian democratic state, where you talk to people and very rarely does the word government come up, but things still work. This is all worked out. The levels of violence are very low, I claim. You can actually sign up with a police force, you subscription to a police force. There's lots of police forces. And some of them are no right to bear arms police forces. The cops actually carry them. That's why we have it. But the deal is that if you sign up with them, you don't carry them. And then there are other police forces that are more like the classical libertarian ones. And then there are cross agreements between these. So actually, my big point in the story was that there could be and should actually, I can't imagine any form of constructive anarchy working unless it's actually substantially more peaceful than what we have within the United States. And it was very peaceful. The story is what happens when you get invaded. And they get invaded by a classic democracy, which is convinced that these are just ruffians, managed by gangs of marauding, gun-toting people who call themselves contract police. And seeing how that works out was a lot of fun, although my solution is fairly scary.